You guys didn't think I was going to forget about the main show this week, did ya? Now, continuing with the celebration of my 5 years over here on YouTube, not only am I making 5 videos listing my top 5 favorites on 5 different subjects, but I'm also making this video just so I could ask you, are you ashamed to be a wrestling fan? Many of us know that professional wrestling just isn't as popular as it once was, and if it's ever going to return back to its former glory, we're going to have to get it back into the mainstream. Now, how do we do that? Well, it's not going to happen as long as we all remain shy about it. So, what do we do about this? Well, that's what we're here to talk about, because today, a very special thank you to all my awesome Patreon supporters out there like Tom Hughes, Rodney Harris, and Baba Yaga. Thank all of you so much, and if you want to become a Patreon yourself, then check out my Patreon page as I really do appreciate all the support. Once upon a time, wrestling was a part of the American zeitgeist. How is it viewed around the world? Well, I don't really know, but I would like to. So if you're from a country outside of the United States, please tell me how professional wrestling was viewed where you're from, and also how it's changed down in the comments. But back to the States. The WWF was definitely the tour de force as far as wrestling being pop culture is concerned. Between the rock and wrestling days with WWF programming being on MTV, all the way down to The Rock appearing on Saturday Night Live. And even though some of this still happens now and pro wrestling does appear in pop culture in other ways, things aren't exactly the same, which is why many people want to bring things back old school. Back when I was in high school, I openly talked about professional wrestling, like all the time, as back then, wearing something like a wrestling t-shirt was considered cool. Is that true now? Well, I don't really know, but I am pretty sure that things have definitely changed.
Hey, pay attention!
For instance, how many of you are candid about your professional wrestling fandom in the workplace? And if you're not, is that only because your coworkers already told you that they themselves were fans? Or were you the one who first threw out the feeler bet to find out if anybody else was cool? Because for a lot of people, when it comes to pro wrestling, well, it might as well be not safe for work material. It's not what it looks like. I'm watching porn. Oh yeah, that was the best part. I totally agree. Oh, and furthermore, what about in a romantic setting? How many of you have tried to conceal your wrestling fandom to a significant other just because you didn't want them to think that you were a huge dork? Nah, baby, that ain't me talking about wrestling on YouTube. I don't watch that crap. And when you are in a relationship, how long do you wait to tell them that you are indeed a fan? Because sooner or later, you're going to have to. How many times I gotta tell you that's not me on YouTube talking about wrestling? Where are you going? Aren't you gonna pick up the check? And look, I get it. It can be really intimidating, letting everybody know that you're a pro wrestling fan. I, for one, understand that being vulnerable about what you're really passionate about, especially when it's really not accepted in mainstream society, can be rather unnerving. How many times I gotta tell you guys, I don't watch wrestling! I don't like it! Now, granted, being an adult definitely has something to do with not being able to get away with wearing wrestling t-shirts in public anymore, although I don't think that's the only reason. After all, wearing something like a football jersey is perfectly acceptable in today's society, because football is just more mainstream. Nobody's embarrassed about liking football, which might just be part of the problem. Wrestling appearing on ESPN or trying to act akin to UFC or other forms of shoot sports is, well, kind of damaging. Wrestling is a predetermined athletic contest. It is what it is. It's sports entertainment, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. I say it all the time. Wrestling is theater in the round, advanced stage combat, and it's half improv. The wrestlers themselves are in fantastic shape. They can act, and it's all done with some of the most intense television production known to man. So why is that something that anyone is trying to hide, when it's something that you really should be proud of instead? Just admit to what we all already know. Yes, pro wrestling is predetermined, but take pride in all the effort that takes to produce. And don't give me this exposing the business nonsense, as insiders clearly have no problem exposing the business all the time in interviews and on podcasts or wherever. Vince McMahon even testified before the state senate that wrestling was predetermined, so pro wrestling being a work really isn't news. However, speaking of news...
That is not how it's supposed to go down! You must rise under... No, just me? All right, fair enough.
This was a lot of closeted wrestling fans' biggest fears when it comes to the idea of going public. A thunderous silence, letting them know just how alone they really are when it comes to their fandom. But let's go to another example.
I like wrestling, and you might be surprised to hear that, but I'd argue it's objectively entertaining.
It's interesting to note that before John Oliver went on to criticize WWE on their business practices, he first felt the need to say that he himself is a wrestling fan, but then spent the next few minutes completely apologizing for it and rationalizing why he finds it entertaining. Like his reputation of being viewed as a smart, intelligent human being was somehow at risk now that we all know he's a wrestling fan. And Jon Stewart and John Oliver are far from the only celebrities that like wrestling, as there are a ton of them. Some of the Impractical Jokers, Hugh Jackman, Bad Bunny, these public figures have let their love of pro wrestling be known on a public level. So why don't all of us?
Where were you when your own people needed you? Hiding! Pretending to be something you're not!
Now, with all that being said, if you're still ashamed of being a pro wrestling fan because it's not cool anymore, it's not as popular as it used to be, and it's not a part of the mainstream, well, there might just be a silver lining for you. Comic books. Once upon a time, comics, Dungeons & Dragons, Star Trek, these were all total giveaways that you were a nerd. But things have progressed. Nowadays, comic book films are probably the most popular genre of movies there could possibly be. I'm beginning to wonder if they're even allowed to make other types of films anymore. Anyway, the point of the matter is, what was once considered dorky can now be considered chic. It just comes and goes, it evolves and changes throughout time. And when it comes to professional wrestling, well, it was already on the top of the mountain before, so I don't see any reason why it can't possibly go back there again. But even taking that into consideration, I do also have to say that you shouldn't be ashamed of being a pro wrestling fan. You should be able to like what you like and not be afraid to be open about your passions. Never be afraid to be true to yourself. And if you really want to not be ashamed of being a pro wrestling fan, then just know that it all begins with you not being ashamed of pro wrestling itself first. It all starts with you, because being comfortable with being a pro wrestling fan really means being comfortable with yourself. Well, there you go, my thoughts on being ashamed of being a pro wrestling fan. Have you ever tried to cover your fandom up? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up, as well as making sure that you're subscribed and a member of the Know It All Nation. Thank you so much to you and all of my Patreon supporters, and as always, Dave knows.